You know, as managers, we're all pretty obsessed with performance. But what does good performance actually look like? Is it really just about hitting your targets and staying under budget, or is there something deeper? Well, today we're going to unpack a framework that helps us get beyond just being busy and start focusing on what really truly creates an impact.
So let me ask you this right up front. Are you busy doing things right? Or are you focused on doing the right things? I mean, really think about that for a second. The difference might sound small, but it's actually a huge chasm between a good manager and a great one. See, one is all about process, the other is about purpose. And figuring out that difference, well, that's the key to unlocking real success.
So how do we make sure we're on the right side of that chasm? Luckily, there's this really powerful tool from management theory called the method of the 4 E's. It's a surprisingly simple way of thinking that builds a clear path from just, taking action all the way to achieving strategic, meaningful results.
So here they are, the 4 E's. Now, don't think of this as just some boring checklist. It's more like a ladder. Each step builds on the one before it, taking us to a higher, more sophisticated level of thinking about our work. We're going to start at the absolute bottom with efficaciousness and climb all the way to the top, to effectiveness.
All right, let's start on the first rung of our ladder. Efficaciousness. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, I know, but the idea behind it is incredibly simple. This is the absolute baseline for anything you do. Before we can even ask if something was done well, we first have to ask, did anything even happen at all?
Efficaciousness is just about producing a result, any result. It doesn't care if that result was good or bad or expensive or cheap. It only asks one simple question. Did our action cause some kind of effect? If the answer is yes, congrats, you've achieved efficaciousness. It's the starting block for everything else.
And what's really interesting is the opposite of this. Non-efficaciousness isn't just failure. It's more like this weird organizational fog. Imagine this. You just finished a massive, stressful negotiation, and on the table, you find an unopened, anonymous envelope. A message exists, right? An effect was intended. But because you can't identify it or connect it to anything, it's useless. That is a failure of efficaciousness.
Okay, so once we know we can actually produce a result, the next logical question is, well, at what cost? And this is where the degree of economy comes in. This is the step where we start bringing resources into the equation, and it moves us up to the next rung on that ladder.
The whole concept is beautifully simple. You achieve a degree of economy when your effects, the results you get, are greater than the effort or the cost you put in. It's really the first test of whether something is viable. Are you creating more value than you're consuming? If your effects minus your costs are greater than 0, you're on the right track.
But here's the thing, getting this balance wrong can be really dangerous. On one side, if your effects are way bigger than your costs, you risk squandering, basically wasting resources through things like overproduction. But on the flip side, if your costs are much higher than your effects, you end up in penury. You're undervaluing your work and starving your projects of the resources they need. Both of these extremes, they're huge red flags for poor management.
Okay, climbing up to step 3, we get to a word that absolutely everyone knows and loves. Efficiency. This is that classic time-honored metric of good management. This is where we start getting really focused on how we're doing things. This is the whole doing things right part of the equation.
At its core, efficiency is all about the ratio of outputs to inputs. How much bang are you getting for your buck? It's all about optimization. Can you get the same result with fewer resources? Or maybe, with the resources you already have, can you squeeze out an even bigger result? That's the fundamental question of efficiency.
But here's a really important little detail. The thinking behind pure efficiency is basically static. It looks at a process just as it is right now and asks, how can we tweak the knobs to make it better? It's like an observational science of optimization. And look, that's incredibly valuable, but it's not the whole story, not by a long shot.
And that brings us to the very top of the ladder, the final and I would argue the most important E, effectiveness. This, my friends, is the real game changer. Because if efficiency is all about doing things right, then effectiveness is all about doing the right things. And that is what separates a pretty good manager from a true strategic leader.
Let's put it this way. Efficiency is like looking down at the car's engine, tuning it to absolute perfection. Effectiveness is looking up at the map to make sure the car is even going in the right direction. I mean, you can be the most efficient person in the world at a task that doesn't matter, and your total impact will be 0. Effectiveness is what makes sure all that perfectly tuned effort is actually pointed at the right goals.
So how does this actually work in practice? Let's walk through a quick example. So imagine a manager lists out their goals. A totally common way to prioritize is just by the probability of success, right? In this case, increasing profit seems like the most likely win, so it gets the #1 spot. That seems perfectly rational, but it's also an incomplete way of looking at the world.
But now, watch what happens when we add just one more column, strategic impact. Now we're not just asking, can we do it? We're also asking, how much does it matter if we do it? And when we multiply the probability by that strategic impact, bam, the whole priority list gets turned on its head. Suddenly, increasing production output jumps way up in importance. This is effectiveness in action. It's about choosing the right things to spend your energy on.
So, when you get right down to it, this 4Es framework isn't just a set of metrics. It's really a fundamental shift in your mindset. It's about moving away from being purely rational and efficient and moving towards a focus on tangible, meaningful impact. And this leads us to this really powerful idea that the source material proposes. This idea of moving beyond homo rationis, the rational human who just optimizes everything, to become homo effectus, the human of effect, the person who is focused on creating the right outcomes. It's about being impactful, not just being busy.
So, how can you start using this like tomorrow? Here's a really practical way to think about it. You can measure your effectiveness in 3 degrees. First degree, did you get the results you planned for? Simple, right? Second degree, did you get them with the resources you planned to use? And third degree, was your process as efficient as you thought it would be? This gives you a complete 360-degree view of any project you run.
So I'll leave you with this final question to think about. Take a hard look at your own work, at your own team. Where is most of your energy really going? Are you managing for efficiency, or are you managing for effectiveness? Are you focused on doing things right, or are you brave enough to make sure you're doing the right things? The answer? Well, it could change everything. Thanks for tuning in.